Okay, welcome everyone. Great to see you here as part of our weekly webinar series on mobile learning for the ASCILITE Mobile Learning Special Interest Group for our Scholarship of Technology Enhanced Learning Research Cluster. And today our special guest is Dave Parsons from the MindLab, and I've known Dave for quite a number of years now because Dave is one of the, I guess, probably founding mobile learning researchers in New Zealand, and we've worked together on a lot of projects, but also been at a lot of mobile learning conferences together as well. So it's great to have Dave here, and he's going to talk about some of the work we've been doing at the MindLab. We also have from the MindLab Darcy, we have from AUT Lisa, and we have all the way from South Auckland, Ben. So great to have you guys along here as part of our discussion panel today. So feel free to ask questions as we go. I'm going to hand over to Dave now. Dave's going to talk about what they've been up to at the MindLab and perhaps a little bit about what the MindLab is for those who don't know. So thanks, Dave.
Yeah, kia ora koutou. Thanks, Tom. Hi, Ben. Good to see you. Put a face to the name. I will reply to your email.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, so okay, very briefly then, MindLab, just in case you're not that familiar with it. So the MindLab's been through kind of three incarnations. So originally it was just teaching kids in physical labs, and then we had the partnership with Unitec from 2014, where we started teaching at postgraduate level, and we started with our postgrad certificate in digital and collaborative learning, which is for in-service teachers, and that's now expanded out to a number of different postgraduate qualifications. And as that's happened, two things have happened really. The school kid stuff has kind of faded away. So we really only do that now at MOTAT because it's not really any more the heart of the business. So we're now really a graduate school. We've got 3 masters and a postgraduate certificate at the moment, and more projects coming online quite soon. So that we're kind of moved into that postgraduate space in education and innovation, basically. So our programs are either for those in education or they're for those who are in entrepreneurship, business, innovation, those kinds of things. And we're based in Newmarket, which is where I am now. And my role at the MindLab is still primarily to run the postgraduate certificate, which for a long time was by far our largest program. It's kind of shrunk a little bit over the last year or so, but is really fundamentally important to us because it's the first third of our Masters in Contemporary Education, which currently has about 150 or so enrollments. So that's kind of a big thing for us too. Anyway, I'll move on to the main topic of today, which is, what we've been doing over the last few years and what we're doing now in terms of mixed or immersive realities and the tools that we've used. And I guess there's a couple of contexts really. So I'll talk about how we have used them just with the students. And then I'll mention a couple of research projects that are kind of ongoing. One which is primarily virtual reality, and one which is kind of a bit more different tools for both virtual and augmented reality. So if we look back 5 years ago, so when we first started running the program, and we were doing some things with students, we were doing things like Orasma, which still sort of limps on, of course, as HP Reveal, although sadly they haven't really done anything with it. And a lot of quite cool tools that no longer exist, like Elements 4D, Anatomy 4D, for example, that were really nice examples of how AR could be used in the classroom, but are sadly no more. In fact, the only thing that I was looking back, the only thing that survives from right back in those early days is Quiver, which is, if you're not familiar with Quiver, it kind of came out of the HIT lab down in Christchurch. And it was originally designed as a sort of bringing books to life tool, but now it tends to be triggered more by individual sheets, and they produce lots of these, and they've really matured that tool over the years. And although it's not one where you can create stuff, which in most cases I'd say if a tool doesn't let you create anything, it's not very good. Quiver in its market, which allows kids to color things in but then bring them to life and interact with them, I think is actually a pretty cool product. So we still use that in our classrooms. And we've been using, of course, Google Cardboard for some time with different things in it. And we've looked at various things that have come and gone. So Magical Parks was a bit of a thing for a while in Auckland and some other locations, and Pokemon Go, of course, was a big thing for about 5 minutes a while ago too. So
what level did you get to, Dave?
I was crap at it, but I'm really rubbish at all things like that. I'm really not a gamer. I mean, it's like, for example, Minecraft. We talk about Minecraft. Lots of people use Minecraft in the classroom. So I thought, no, I better get to grips with this. So I went out and bought Minecraft for my Xbox. Spent a bit of time on it, and I thought, I can't do this. It's too hard. It's just not,
That's what you use grandchildren for. They become your research subjects.
I just really am not any kind of gamer, or I'm rubbish at any of those things. I can't see the point, frankly. Anyway, that's by the by. Yeah, I'm a bit crap at some of these technologies, to be honest. We've got an HTC Vive, so some of the students have tried out Tilt Brush and things like that. So I think we've tried a lot of tools, and I think from that we've begun to ask ourselves some questions around, well, what's the point of all this in terms of teaching and learning and pedagogy? And I think there's a couple of things that we've done. So I'm just going to sort of remind myself what I was going to talk about. So one of the things that we did over a while was we looked at some of the things students were doing with some tools. And those tools kind of ranged, I mean, it depends how you categorize these different types of technologies. So Google Tour Builder, Google Expeditions was one of them. And actually, Tour Builder was another one. So Google Expeditions, of course, is clearly a VR thing. So you stick it in your cardboard and you visit different places. And that's been around for a while. We've been using that with the students. And we like it because it's a collaborative, role-based activity. So there's some quite nice features to it that you don't get with some other things. But we also sort of compared that with using Action Bound, which, and along with Aris and some of these other location-based tools, they're increasingly incorporating bits of augmented reality. So you do get some kind of layering of the real world. And we also looked at Google Tour Builder, which is kind of based out of Google Earth and is interesting in the sense that some teachers raise questions around what's the added value of being immersed. So if you take Tour Builder, where you can kind of create, you can journey around the world and you can watch, you can interact, you can watch videos, you can create your own sort of environments and build in links and so on. You could say, well, if I start using Tour Creator, which I'll talk about a little bit later, what's the difference? And of course, the only real difference is the idea that you've got the immersive bit, and then the questions arise, well, is it worth the extra effort of doing all that complicated technology compared to just using Tour Builder? And that's one of the questions I like to think about. So anyway, coming back a little bit. So recently, we've got an AJET paper published this year that actually we worked on for a very long time. And it was based on students working with some of these tools. So that particular paper was based on students' reactions to using Google Expeditions and Action Bound and Google Tour Creator. And we were looking at like this whole idea about what do these tools bring? And of course, one of the fairly obvious things that people talk about is the ability to access things that are hard to get to. So we talk about using, say, virtual reality to go to a hostile, inaccessible environment. But there's also the thing where there's not, using virtual reality to go to somewhere that you can access is also useful. And there's some stuff people have written in the States about, if you're going to take your kids, say, to the Grand Canyon or, Mount Rushmore or whatever, there's actually a lot of value in doing a pre-tour in the virtual world. Because it helps orient them and they kind of get over all the sort of the basic info and actually enhances their real world experience when they get there. So I think that's an interesting one too, that just because it's in the virtual world, it doesn't mean it's necessarily you only do that because you can't do it in reality. And I suppose in a sense it ties up really closely with what Tom does at AUT with the paramedics, because at some point they're going to do that for real, and doing it in the virtual world first is a way of making the real world one more effective. So I think, the same idea is coming up there. I guess the other thing that we kind of wonder about is, you know, one of the things that comes up in Milgram and Casino's original article, where they talk about, you know, the mixed reality continuum, and then further down the paper they talk about there's lots of continua in that paper that are much more complicated than figure 1, and they talk about the extent of world knowledge, and we kind of adopted that in a slightly different way to think about what is the knowledge level that you use when you're using mixed reality for teaching. And so often the assumption is that, you know, knowledge is being delivered. So, you know, I guess if you do expeditions and you use an existing expedition, it's like, you know, someone's created something, you go and learn it or learn about it. But there's also the idea that, you know, you might be bringing knowledge into something. So if you're using an augmented or virtual experience, often it's, you know, you want to combine those two together. Clearly, if you're using an augmented tool, you know, it's often that thing where you do situated learning, and there's content there, but there's also the content that you co-create in that environment. And then, of course, also importantly, you want tools to allow students to make things themselves from scratch, so that the knowledge is being constructed from them and by them as well. So I think it's, you know, when we're looking at how we think these tools may be helpful in education, I think all three of those parts are important. And we just kind of talk about, you know, where the learning space comes from too. So yeah, sometimes it's appropriate for a teacher to take a tool and make something for their students. Sometimes it's appropriate for students to make something off their own bat, and sometimes it's important for the teachers and the students to co-create something together. And so I guess the discussions we have around, you know, why do we bother covering these types of tools in our programs are around those. So I just wanted to talk about a couple of projects. Well, there's 3 projects really. One I'll only mention briefly because I wasn't really involved in it, but I think it came up with a couple of ideas, and just going to find the note I made about that for myself. Yeah, so we had some HoloLenses. This must be now a couple of years ago, actually. We had a bunch of HoloLenses that were brought in by a publisher. Because it wasn't a public research thing, none of this was ever published. It was just they wanted us to help them do some research. So across Australasia, they were going into schools with HoloLenses and their own content. And they asked us to, you know, try it out in some of our contact schools. So we took out these HoloLenses with this educational content to a number of schools, tried it out with some students to see what would happen. And of course, it's the usual story with technology, is that, you know, there's a bit of Hawthorne effect at the first time round. It's all whizzy and exciting, and then they get bored extremely quickly because the problem is it's just content. Yeah. And it's not even like New Zealand content. It's, you know, generic content. And so, you know, you can walk through the human body or see the solar system or whatever, but there's real limits to that. The only things that were really effective were, you know, coming back to that idea about where does the content come from. There was a maths set of content in there where students could effectively use that but create their own lessons from it in HoloLens. And so that was the most successful part. And I think that's, you know, what we're always looking for is what do tools let you do that allows you to create new and interesting and exciting things.
It's kind of a no-brainer, really, isn't it, Dave? It's kind of like, yeah, what's the pedagogy behind what you're trying to do, and if it's just, as you say, content delivery, well, no significant difference.
I think the other thing that came out of it, because one of the things the literature says about augmented reality is that it's better than VR because it helps collaboration. Because when you're wearing an AR thing, you're still seeing everybody else in the room. But there's also the issues that you can't stream from a HoloLens to a laptop, and so you can't actually collaborate in other ways. You can collaborate face-to-face, but you can't collaborate digitally in the way that students are beginning to be used to. A couple of other things. I see the time's actually racing on already, but I'll just cover a couple of other projects that we've been working on. So one is, I think Tom will know about this one already. We've been going to Pakuranga College, where some students have been working with VR. So they've been using HTC Vives and a few different tools to create games. While specifically a group of students have created a sledding game, which is in full virtual reality. And it was a really interesting thing because it wasn't just students making something at school, but they were making something that was put out into the market. And the learning that they got from that was just massive, because they learned a bit about coding stuff, but that was the least important thing. You know, they learned so much about interacting with the marketplace, interacting with their customers, you know, just ticked so many boxes in terms of key competencies that it was just such a fascinating project to look at. And we're hoping to go back and see what some of the other groups of students are working on, because the main thing about this is, you know, is it sustainable? Was it just one group of students that got lucky? Or is it an idea where, you know, having a kind of a workshop space like they built at Pakurang, where students are exposed to, you know, real world tools, can lots of students have similar kinds of experiences where they do start engaging with professionals, customers, the business side of it and all that kind of thing, which is ultimately what a lot of them will need to do or will want to do when they leave school. So there's that project. And then the last one that I just wanted to touch on very briefly is one where we've been looking at teachers, ones from the MindLab who are in-service teachers, and also some teachers from EIT who are pre-service teachers. And we're just exposing them to a similar experience with Metaverse and with Google Tour Creator. And of course, in both of those cases, they're creative tools. So Google Tour Creator is the thing that lets you make Google expeditions, basically, so that you can create your own tours. And Metaverse, of course, is an interesting AR tool. It's got some downsides because some of it isn't really augmented reality, in the sense that you can make something that floats around in front of a background, but there's not necessarily any connection between them. And so when we used it, we focused on the fact that it's got Google AI object recognition in it, which we thought was really interesting and maybe a little bit cutting edge compared to some of the other things. But I think what we were hoping to look at in particular was, you know, the government have this digital technologies areas of the New Zealand curriculum, and they're all supposed to be delivered into schools by next year. And teachers are supposed to be up to speed with, how do I integrate these concepts into my teaching and learning across the curriculum? And, you know, teachers aren't ready. There was an article in Stuff this week kind of saying that, well, teachers aren't ready. And they're not. I mean, we talk to them all the time. I mean, the teachers on the certificate, we're helping them to get to grips with this curriculum, and a lot of them, and we say, what's going on at your school? And they go, nothing. You know, or we had someone in for an hour, or, oh yeah, we've got one person who's doing that, which of course is completely not what it's supposed to be about. And it was interesting, because what we found was that we had a similar response to the tools from the teachers. You know, it's kind of mixed. You know, a third of them think they're fantastic. A third of them think they've got potential, but they have reservations. A third of them think they're like, oh, I don't get it, it's too hard, you know, which is not that surprising at first exposure. But the really interesting thing, I think, was that the experienced teachers had much better ideas about what to do with them. And bearing in mind, a lot of our students are knocking on a bit. Some of them are as old as me, for God's sake. But they're able to see the potential of the technologies because they know the pedagogy and they know the learning. It's kind of like a TPAC thing, right? They already know the content and the pedagogy. So if you give them a technology, they say, oh yeah, I can see where that fits into my Venn diagram. I can do that. Whereas if you take pre-service teachers, they don't really know anything yet. You know, they've got minimal experience. They don't really know much about pedagogy and content. So you give them technology as well, and you know, even if they're supposed to be millennials or whatever, they really don't have that. They don't know how to fit those pieces together. So that was a really interesting kind of finding, I think, from that little piece of research. So those are the kinds of things we've been looking at in terms of immersive mixed realities over the last sort of year or so, I guess. So that's probably enough of me wittering on, isn't it? So I guess
it's really interesting, and I'm quite interested in that sort of last little discussion around, you know, pre-service teachers and millennials. You know, the assumption is that we should get them involved in decision making because they're the ones who are all up to speed with the technology. But as you say, they've got no idea around pedagogy or the application of it. And so, you know, if we start making decisions on strategy decisions based on that, then we're not going to get very far. Because as you say, they just don't have the experience to be able to go beyond what they've done before.
Yeah, and they don't have the confidence either to take a chance, whereas experienced teachers do. You know, an experienced teacher will be willing to give something a try and won't worry too much if it doesn't work. Whereas, obviously, you know, if you're a student teacher, you're terrified of getting it wrong. So I think that's another layer to it as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, really interesting stuff. And I've played with Google Tool Builder a number of years ago when it first came out. I really liked it. I found it really good, particularly for creating a bit of a interactive record of overseas travel. So if I go to a conference, then it'd be a way of sharing that experience virtually with my family, or as a presentation once I got back to my colleagues, etc. So kind of interested in where that's got to, because it used to be just you had to do it all on a desktop or a laptop. You had to basically have, a full Windows or Mac OS to create that. Is it still the case, or has it moved to mobile at all? Or?
Yeah, I really don't think they've put any effort into it at all. It still says Google Tool Builder Beta at the top of the page. It said beta for the last 2 or 3 years,
Right, so you can't actually do this on a mobile device yet?
Don't think so. And it doesn't seem that it's actually evolved in any terms of any of its features either. And of course, the other thing the most annoying thing for our teachers is that it's not a collaborative tool. That is, you can't edit it collaboratively at the same time. And of course, they're so used to Google Tools being collaborative, they find that really weird. So yeah, that's
that's true. So I guess any other questions from our erudite members who are joining us for this discussion?
Thanks, David. That was really, really good. I'm really interested in what you had to say there. How long did it take you to create one of the exercises for, or you with the lecturers, to put one together to present to students?
From which tool?
From one of the early tools that you spoke about. It was called was it Quiver?
Oh, Quiver, yeah. So Quiver is kind of a pre-built thing. So basically what you can do is you go to the Quiver website and they've got a whole bunch of, they're basically like triggers. So that they're preset triggers. And then you can interact with them in the app. The thing that makes them good for young kids is that they have the opportunity to color in and draw on the triggers. So the one that I actually really like, is one where they can create their own flags. So that
it's kind of like image-based recognition.
Yeah, and then it comes up and they can see their flag as it would be in different wind conditions, and it really sort of brings their ideas to life. And there's quite a few. I mean, most of the triggers you have to pay for, but there's a few free ones, and we just introduce it using the free ones. But they do have education packs where, they are quite cool. They're not much use for older kids, but they're great for younger kids because it's really motivating to sort of see your work come alive, I think. So yeah, I really like Quiver, even though, there's no real, you can't create your own pictures in it in terms of like your own triggers, but the ones that they provide. And I think what makes them nice is they're so interactive. So there's one with a volcano, one of the free ones, and there's like so many different views. You don't just like see the volcano full stop, like some of the, like Blipper's example used to be. There's a lot of things that you can interact with, and you can see different parts. And, I think they're really nice examples of what can be done with effectively, AR books really, although it's just single sheets.
Simple stuff for them. Okay,
hey,
thanks for that.
To say thank you, Dave, because our session
time's nearly up.
before it actually shuts down automatically. So just in case it does, I want to say thank you before I get cut off. And it's been great to talk to you and catch up with what MindLab's been up to, which is fantastic. Really keen to really work with the MindLab and make that bridge between tertiary and secondary education, particularly say around our symposium, which we run in February. So we can get some involvement, some showcases from perhaps some of the educators you've been working with. So that's our SOTEL Symposium, Scholarship of Technology Enhanced Learning, 19th to 20th of February next year.
Yeah, we should work on that for sure. Yeah, thanks, Tom.
Thank you. I have one quick question, if you don't mind.
If you've got time.
So how could VR actually help students to become familiar with the new environments? What are the features that VR could actually help students with? Is it just the virtual environment, or is there a possibility to introduce students with the norms in that environment, or also the level of interactions, or all of them?
Yeah, well, I suppose it's everything, isn't it? I mean, really, what you want from a VR environment is to be able to enhance the real world later, I think, ideally. So you want to be able to interact in a deep and meaningful way, so that it's not just looking at stuff, but it helps you to engage with the real world rather than kind of replace it, I guess.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Dave. It's about what are the learning outcomes and in real life from virtual reality. We're not about trying to replace real life. We're about enhancing that and having significant outcomes in it. So I'm going to finish the recording now because it's getting, yeah, there we go. It's telling us it's going to end soon anyway, because apparently we have to upgrade to get longer. So thank you all again, once again. And
thanks a lot.
again next week.
Thanks very much, Tom. Cheers.
Yes, bye-bye.
Bye.